Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'd like to do a little comparison between these two trucks. They're both Element Enduros. The one on the left is the new Element Enduro Builder's Kit 2 and the one on the right is the Builder's Kit 1. I'm going to take a look at the differences between these two trucks and try and work out which of the changes are upgrades and which ones aren't. Okay, so let's take a look at the Builder's Kit 2 in a little bit more detail. The biggest change on these is the gatekeeper suspension system, and basically what that means is that you have the option of mounting the top mounting of the shocks a bit higher. There's now 5 positions in total. You can actually raise them by up to 7mm compared to the original setting, which is the same as the bottom setting on here. Another benefit of the gatekeeper suspension system as well is there's some changes to the panhard mount. On the original Enduro, this is just an extension in plastic from the shock hoop. However, on the gatekeeper suspension system, they use an aluminium plate here, and this plastic mount here has got 3 different positions to screw into. So that gives you a variety of things you can do. The main thing is you can get the suspension running at a lower ride height and have more compression. One of the features, in my opinion, problems with the original Enduro is it does tend to ride very high and also doesn't have a great deal of it still rides very high even when the suspension is fully compressed. Even when you push it right the way down, it's still quite high up. So by changing the top shock mounting position, you get the opportunity to run the truck a lot lower, which is a real advantage. To enable this as well, they now mount the servo on the top of this servo mounting plate, whereas in the originals it's mounted on the bottom. That means that you have enough clearance around the servo horn here, so it's quite difficult to see, but the servo horn here now has enough clearance when you compress the suspension that you don't hit it, even though you can compress it further than you could do before. You also get this little blanking plate as well. You could use that, for example, for a receiver or maybe a speed controller mounting if you didn't want to have an extra servo in there for whatever reason. So that's the overview of the gatekeeper suspension system. There's lots of benefits to this in terms of performance, in my opinion. There is a bit of a downside to it as well, but I'll talk about that later. The next obvious change is the shock absorbers. Element have gone with the factory team bronze coloured shocks on this version of the builder's kit. I personally love the look of these. I much prefer the dark colours to the shiny silver bodies and the blue caps of the original builder's kit. But you could say that this is a downgrade in some regards. These are quite expensive shocks, but the caps are plastic, whereas previously they were aluminium, and the same for the spring cups. They're downgraded to plastic instead of aluminium. We'll have to wait and see if durability is going to be a concern. I have run plastic caps on associated buggies for a very long time and not had a problem, so my instinct is it isn't going to be a problem. Proof will be in the pudding after a few runs. The next major change on the Builder's Kit 2 is to the links. On the original kits, they were just a straight silver coloured link. They're now this high clearance bent link with this nice dark finish and with the printing on there as well, so it's a factory team part. Certainly as a link it works just fine. My small concern with this is that it does reveal a bit more of the drive shaft than it did with the straight links, so I'll keep an eye on whether there's any damage there in the future. They look good, but I don't think they're going to perform any differently, to be honest with you. So for me, that is just an even, not really an upgrade, just an alternative. You can see as well that there are some different pivot balls now. They use these Delrin ones to attach the shocks and the links. They're the same moulding as the black ones on the original kits, but they are a bit harder and they're a bit smoother. So from my perspective, they are an upgrade, although perhaps steel would have been an even better improvement. Something you can't see is the wheel hexes. They're now steel on the Builder's Kit 2 compared to plastic on the original Builder's Kit. Definitely an upgrade. Another steel part, which I'll have seen briefly earlier, is the servo horn here. And again, that is a steel part. The original Builder's Kit used a plastic part, which I didn't have any problems with, but certainly An upgraded servo horn is a very welcome upgrade, a welcome addition to the Builder's Kit 2. Small changes as well to the rock sliders and the bumper mount. These are from the Trail Runner SUV rather than the original ones that came from the Trail Walker. Just gives a slightly different position on the side. They actually dip down slightly lower, so you can mount the body lower, but it's a small thing. You don't get the bumper mounting holes in the rear because it's from the Ecto. So if you wanted to mount a bumper, you'd need to find the plastic parts from an original Enduro. So again, it's really a draw between the two kits. It's just two different ways of doing the same thing. The final big change in the Builder's Kit 2 is one that you can't see. The Builder's Kit 2 is using the plastic transmission gears in here, the same as the ready-to-run trucks, whereas the Builder's Kit 1 had the upgraded steel gears. Now, perhaps the steel gears are stronger, however, the plastic gears are lighter, and this is an area that's above the centre of gravity of the truck, so you've got a bit of a reduction, a lower centre of gravity with the plastic gears. For me, this is just a draw. I had no problems with the steel gears, so the reduction in weight is a beneficial thing for me. We'll have to wait and see whether there's any durability concerns with this. Some things don't come in the box of the Builder's Kit 2 that came in the box of the Builder's Kit 1, namely some alternative links for building to different wheelbases, and also the alternative lay shaft for the transmission. Element have an option whereby you can rotate the transmission by 180 degrees if you want to. Just gives a slightly different mounting position for the motor. For me, I've always built them with this orientation, and I've only ever run the trucks with 12.3 inch wheelbase, 313mm wheelbase body shells. So missing out on those parts is not a negative for me. So again, just a draw for me. And I did mention I was going to talk again about the shock mounts. So there is a small negative to these new shock mounts. Absolutely, I'm fully in favour of having a lower ride height without affecting the suspension travel. But because these new shock mounts are about 10mm higher than the old ones, it means that when you mount some bodies, well, they just won't mount the same way that they used to. So you will find that there's some bodies that went fine on an original Element Enduro that won't go so fine on this Builder's Kit 2. I'll use this Proline Hilux as an example, and I'll just pop it on the truck here. I'll do a better shot of it in a moment. There we go. So it's not really in shot, but you can see on the side here that there's a really steep angle where it's not lining up with the rock slider at all. And you can see here that basically that shock mount is touching against the body shell already. There's the mounting holes there. This body fits fine on a normal original Enduro, but on the Builder's Kit 2, if you wanted to get it to fit, you'd have to get your knife out and you'd have to make some quite big cuts in the back here, which is not to everyone's taste. And there aren't any alternative body mounts, so you'd need to improvise a little bit. You'd possibly find something that fits in there. I know that the Ecto has some small body mounts that go in there, or you could adapt something else to go in there and hold it in place, but it's just an extra step that personally I prefer not to have to do with a kit. I prefer to have full backwards compatibility with other shells, but you know, sometimes that's the way it works out, and that's the price you pay for having an increase in performance. So to sum up, this is very much a case of Element taking a different approach to a builder's kit rather than adding a load of upgrades. These two trucks still share a lot of the Enduro's DNA, and that's a good thing because it's a fantastic performing truck out of the box. So overall, do I think it's a worthwhile upgrade? I'll give it a qualified yes. As I said, if you're doing a very scale build, you might be a bit frustrated by the rear shock mounts, but if that's not what you're trying to do, it's a great performing truck with some really worthwhile performance upgrades, a nice stealthy black look if you're into that, and I'm confident it's definitely a step forward over the Builder's Kit 1. If you've got any questions or comments, please do leave them below. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching.